Hi, welcome to today's edition of Healthy Living. Joining us now is Dr. Nancy Welch, Interim Director of the Western Tidewater Health District.
Good to be
Dr.
here.
Welch, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Now, of course, summer is here, and we are so excited. Everybody's looking to get in the wonderful outdoors and celebrate family reunions, picnics, that type of thing. But there is a lot that we really need to be concerned with when it comes to summer safety. And I don't think anything can spoil a vacation or a trip just as more so than having to go to an emergency room.
Right.
So if we could, we've got a couple of different topics
Sure.
we'd like to talk about today related to safety, starting with sun exposure and some things that we need to do to protect ourselves when, as I said, enjoying the outdoors.
Right. There are a couple of things. I think there are some obvious things that most people are aware of. You really should wear a hat. You need to wear some protection factor that's at least 15 or above. You really should try to avoid being out. Not being out at times between 10 and 4, but I know we're here at the beach and everybody's going to go to the beach, and that's exactly when they're going to be out. So you really need to see if you can modify that somewhat. Having grown up in Florida, I've had my share of sunburns. I can appreciate the dilemma, but the problem is, of course, sunburns do relate to the risk of skin cancer later on in life. I think beyond simply the sunburn issue is the issue of heat. Because we have a tendency to be just as active or try to be just as active in the sun when it's hot as we might in the fall when it's a little cooler, or the spring when it's a little cooler. So I think it's important for people to understand some of the risk of the heat, such as heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Those are sort of the three categories, and I've mentioned them from the less severe to the more severe.
Okay.
And the heat cramps is because you've lost a lot of salt and water from rigorous activity, and you get, say, cramps in your legs,
I guess
for
that would be
example.
through the sweating process then, as far as the loss of that.
Because our sweat contains salt, and of course it contains water as well. And so the best thing to do with that is to drink fluids, especially, say, some of those Gatorade sports type fluids or juices, and to get cool. The obvious kind of response, and generally that you're going to recover after a couple hours. You don't want to just stay out for 15 minutes. I know if people are out playing a football game or whatever, or basketball, they're not going to listen to this, but the truth of the matter is, if you don't stay out for an hour or so, you run the risk of it moving up the stage in terms of problems or complications. And the next level is what we call heat exhaustion. And heat exhaustion is when you have just really lost a lot of fluid. And the thing about heat exhaustion, and this is an important distinction between heat exhaustion and, say, stroke, and also with even cramps, you'll be sweating. You'll be sweating normally because that's how we try to get our body temperature down.
Okay.
Heat exhaustion is when you've been sweating fine, you sweat, your body is cool and moist because you've been sweating, your body has been working, doing exactly what it's supposed to do. When you're out there playing a sport or very active in the sun, it's trying to keep your temperature down so your temperature doesn't go up. Because when you are, a lot of people don't realize this or even think about it, but when you're out there running or doing something energetic, you're burning calories. And calories translates to heat.
Okay.
So when you are active and energetic, then you are creating heat. It's almost like turning on the stove in your body, because that's how, just what the calories do, it releases that heat. And so all of this sweating process and the drinking fluids is to help your body maintain our normal temperature. That's how we cool. When we sweat, it evaporates and helps to cool our body temperature down. It's good that we sweat. It's a good thing. But if you are not taking in enough fluids and you're sweating normally, then you may perhaps have heat exhaustion. And that's a situation you may feel dizzy, a little bit muscle ache, tired, nauseated. But the best thing then, and this is when you are heat exhaustion, your body is cool and moist, you're sweating, is to get underneath a shade tree, drink the fluids,
Umbrella at the
down,
beach, whatever
fan,
it takes.
Right, exactly. Fan yourself. You are sweating, so you want to enhance that evaporation that will help cool to get your body temperature to where it needs to be. But the main thing is that you've lost a lot of fluid, so you want to replenish that fluid. You want to take in the fluid. Now, the worst, more severe state is what we call heat stroke. And heat stroke is when your body has actually just reached such a temperature and it can no longer maintain your temperature. It cannot maintain even the systems to help maintain the body temperature. So you're not sweating anymore.
So I guess that's the sign then, as far as going from one extreme to the other then.
That's the big key.
Okay.
That's exactly right. That's the big key, because that means your body is just not able to regulate your body temperature anymore. Because remember, I said the sweating is the way our body helps to regulate. But in heat stroke, it has lost the ability to regulate, so it's dry skin. You're not sweating. In the meantime, though, your body temperature may be sky high. 103, 104, 105, sky high, but you're not using the sweat mechanism to cool down. That's very dangerous, very severe. Under those circumstances, the signs and symptoms can get to delirious. You are just not aware of what's going on. You can lose consciousness. You can actually die from it. You are feeling just really very bad. Sometimes you can be so disoriented you can't really communicate or talk well. And under those circumstances, that's an emergency.
So that's the stage then, that if someone does, experience those initial symptoms, but then transitions to the not sweating, the loss possibly of consciousness, that type of thing, that's the time then to get emergency care.
That absolutely is an emergency.
Okay.
That is an emergency. And that can be prevented if you are taking the fluids and taking some time in the shade to help get your body temperature down. That's the whole key, is just trying to keep the body temperature down. We don't want to burn on the inside, kind of thing.
Now, with those types of situations, Dr. Welch, what can someone do if someone they are with is experiencing those types of symptoms to possibly help them before emergency assistance arrives?
Absolutely, and good question, because the first and foremost, you want to do everything you can to try and get that body temperature down. If there's a hose, if there's water, you want to put it all over that person. If there's a fan, if you can use a fan, or there's an electric fan, because that is simulating sweating.
Okay.
And helping to get that temperature down. So you want to obviously have them in a shady place so that they're not getting the sun on them. Everything that can be done to get that temperature down. That's the key, is to get that temperature down.
So I know we had talked about the importance of hydration and so forth, as far as whether exercising or out enjoying the sunshine, that type of thing. But is there a type of hydration? Are there some products better than others? I know we talked about the Gatorade products and so forth, but I think especially oftentimes alcoholic beverages go hand in hand with people out on the water or celebrating.
That's a no-no.
Yeah. So I guess it's important for folks to know that that's not the type of beverage that you want to be hydrating yourself with then.
Right. Absolutely. I'm glad you asked the question. Actually, the best thing is water.
Okay.
The best thing is just plain old-fashioned water and drinking lots and lots of water. And to remind yourself to take breaks to drink water. And sometimes this is where just sort of being a buddy to each other is very helpful, to remind each other, hey, let's take a water break, and to drink it. And even if you don't think you're thirsty, you're sweating, you're losing fluid, drink that water because you want to replace it, because that's the only way you're going to replace it. And alcohol and those substances, people may say it quenches my thirst, but the problem is they actually can dehydrate you. So
you're compounding the problem essentially then.
Correct. So you really don't want to be, that's in fact, you're right, you're picnicking, everybody brings the beer and those people drink the beer, but you need to intersperse that with a bit of water.
Now moving on to, I know of course with Suffolk we've got an abundance of some beautiful parks and outdoor recreational activities and opportunities abound for us here, but there's something also that we need to be careful with when we're enjoying the outdoors, and that's to be aware of Lyme disease, and I know that's definitely an issue. Ticks
specifically, because there are actually 3 diseases, tick-borne diseases that we primarily see here in Virginia. Lyme's disease is the primary one. Last year there were a little over 1,000 cases, but the other 2 we see are called ehrlichiosis and Rocky Mountain spotted fever. We saw about 200 of those. But the main one is indeed Lyme's disease, and a lot of people have heard about that. And I would tell you that because we had a very mild winter, we did not kill off a lot of those ticks.
So we even need to take more precautions, I guess, this year.
We started seeing ticks and mosquitoes, and we can get to mosquitoes in a little bit, but we started seeing those much sooner in the year than we normally see. With anyone who has dogs or, as you say, gardens or is in the outdoors, I'm sure probably started seeing ticks in May and some in April, which is a lot earlier than what we usually do. So we do worry about the ticks, absolutely. And the ticks, there should be a picture up on the screen that shows the different types of ticks. And the ticks that we worry about is that first one up top, the Ioxodes, and you can see it's a very tiny one. And specifically the one that transmits the Lyme's disease is the nymph stage. Very, very tiny. It's not even it's just a small, what, 1/8 of an inch or so. It's a very small little tick. And the thing about these ticks, it's the nymph that is the prime one that does transmit the Lyme's disease. And the thing of concern this year, quite honestly, is not only because we had the mild winter, and so we didn't kill them off with the cold weather, so here we have a surplus of these ticks, but also, that sounds kind of strange, but I will make the connection. We did not have many acorns this last year, and the connection is this, that the ticks, the adult lays the eggs in the fall, October to May, and then the larvae is the first stage, and that hatches around July or August. And when they hatch, doing that, both of these stages, actually all 3 stages, they need a blood meal. They have to have a blood meal in order to survive. And they like little rodents for the blood meal. They like the rodents, the chipmunks for the blood meal. Well, the main food for those rodents is acorns. And so when you have lots of acorns, you have lots of these mice, which means there will be lots of blood meals for the larvae, and many more of these larvae will survive. So that means you have lots of these nymphs in the next stage.
You never really think about the correlation between the two.
And so you can have this, which happened 2 years ago, lots of acorns, lots of larvae. So then we get to the next spring, when the nymphs hatch, you get to the next stage of the nymphs. Well, if the fall before then, which is what happened here in Virginia, there were less acorns, then when there are less acorns, then this nymph now has a situation where there are not as many mice because there were not as many acorns, so the mice couldn't thrive. They didn't have the food and the nutrition. So now we have a whole lot of nymphs, and we have less mice for them to feed on. Well, the problem is that the larvae really will only want to feed on the rodent. If it doesn't have the rodents, it dies off. That nymph's not so fussy. And that nymph, if those rodents are not around, it's going to come to you, me, deer, dog, cat. It will gladly get its blood meal on any of those. And that's the situation where we are. So not only do we have the fact that we had a very mild winter, so we didn't kill them off, we also have this situation with less of the rodents because of less of the acorns, so they're going to come to us for their blood meal. So that means there are more opportunities for us to be bitten by these ticks and to transmit Lyme's disease.
And what are the actual symptoms then of Lyme's disease that people should definitely be on the lookout for?
Right, and they're actually pretty vague kinds of symptoms, and you may get symptoms from a couple of days to several weeks, or some will even say months after exposure. And actually, it is important to emphasize that for Lyme's disease, that tick has to be on you for about 36 hours in order to transmit it.
So I guess it's even more important to make sure that you check yourself than when coming in from the outdoors.
Right. If you check yourself at least every 12 hours, but I'd like to see it every 4 to 6 hours. I say I'd like to see it every 4 to 6 hours because Rocky Mountain spotted fever, the tick that transmit that, only has to be on you for 4 to 6 hours to transmit that. So if you check yourself every 4 to 6 hours, you should get rid of the tick before it can transmit any of those diseases. But the diseases actually for all of them have a lot of similarities. You pretty much, it's almost like a flu-like illness in that you just really have a lot of fatigue, muscle ache, muscle soreness, headache, may have a mild fever. Now the Lyme's disease, 70 to 80+% of the people who have Lyme's disease will have what's called a target rash, and hopefully there's a picture on your screen of that now, and it does look like a target.
Almost like a bullseye or whatever, huh?
Correct, like a bullseye. And not everybody who has Lyme's disease will have that rash, and it occurs at the site where the bite occurred. But 70+% of the people have that rash. If you have that target rash, then it's almost a given that we, especially been out in the woods kind of thing, so that history to go with it, that's Lyme disease. And the good news is that you don't want to wait for a test result, because the test result can actually be negative until several weeks down the road. And so the results may not be helpful because we want you to go see the physician early, right? So the key is to be suspicious that this could be Lyme's disease, because there is medication.
So what type of treatment then is
It's
most
like a
used for-
doxycycline. It's an oral medication.
Okay.
It's very easy to take. And now there are some different schools of thought with regards to how long you take it. I will say that. There are different schools of thought, because some people feel you need to take it for a very prolonged amount of time to prevent it becoming a chronic disease. Others feel you take it for a shorter 10-day type course. So there are different schools of thought on that. But the treatment that is used, in other words, the antibiotic that is used, is the same in both situations, and it's very effective.
Now, with those of us that do, as I said, with pets and going into the woods and so forth, what if we do have, locate a tick? What is the best method of removing that?
Right. You don't want to just take your fingers and squeeze it and remove it, because you might, in essence, get some of the fluid or stuff. You have a sore or cut on your hand, especially when gardening. I'm sure that it's not unusual to have that on your hand or your fingers. It's really best to either use a tissue or tweezers, and you want to grasp it right down close to where it is on the skin. I know there are a number of old-fashioned techniques. You
We hear
burn
the
it,
old
you
thing
put-
about the fingernail polish or
right,
Vaseline,
right.
but I guess those are all, counterproductive.
Right.
I guess the tick then regurgitates
Right.
into the wound or whatever, and can cause even
So
more
it's going to make it even
problem,
worse. So the key is to try to pull the whole thing off. You don't
Okay.
want to leave the head there, to pull the whole thing off. And then you do want to use a local antibiotic. Clean it good with soap and use a local antibiotic. And equally as important as to removing the tick are some suggestions about how to even make your environment unfriendly for the tick, because we don't want the tick
Well,
there.
let's talk about those then. Great, because it's starting to feel kind of creepy and crawly right now. So what can we do to protect ourselves then in the first place?
I know in the South we're supposed to be hospitable, but this is a time we don't want to be, because we want to create an environment that is uninviting for the tick. And the tick loves to live underneath leaves in a dark, moist area. So keeping your lawn well cut, cleaning up the leaves. If there are areas that don't get much sun, because sun will help keep it dry, then you certainly want to be sure that you clean up the leaves from there. There are also, of course, using pesticides on the yard can help, but some people are reluctant to do that if they have other animals who are playing in the yard, so I understand that. And there are some people who also promote at the border of your yard. Of course, here in Suffolk you have a lot of big yards, but at the border of what you would use on your yard, to put like gravel or mulch or something that can also keep, maybe deter the rodents and other animals from coming over. And because we have a lot of deer out here in Suffolk, I'm not a horticulturist, so I can't discuss specifics, but you probably know more than I. But I know that there are particular plants that the deer like to eat, and there are plants the deer do not like to eat. So it really would be wise to talk with someone who understands the different plants, because you do not want the deer
Again, making it less hospitable,
Right.
something that they can't feed on, where they're actually going to be closer to your own environment.
Correct.
then.
And a lot of people like to have bird feeders, but if you create sort of that mulch, gravel barrier, put the bird feeders on the other side kind of thing, because that also invites rodents.
Now, another topic, as I said, since we're talking about the creepy crawlies and everything else, is of course mosquitoes, and I know that's definitely been an issue, and especially with experiencing the warmer weather earlier on this season as well. But of course, West Nile and the other mosquito-borne illnesses are also something for us to be concerned with.
Absolutely, and I would tell you that in Chesapeake we have already had some mosquitoes that were positive for triple E, the EEE, Eastern Equine Encephalitis. So we know that the virus is already out there.
Okay.
We know it's there. And so we know that there are some of the mosquitoes that can transmit it. So this is going to be a really tough year to get through this summer without anybody coming down with the illness, because we did not have a cold winter. Those mosquitoes did not die off, and they are here, and we started seeing them in large numbers back in April.
Right.
And if you looked at the rates, at least in Chesapeake, I can't say for sure in Suffolk, but we're so close next door neighbors here that I think it's probably comparable. We were seeing numbers in April 400 times what we saw the year before.
Oh my goodness.
So they're out there, and they're in large quantities. And again, there are a number of things to do to help protect. You want to keep the grass down low.
Right.
You want to try to eliminate your water containing, like on the bottoms of plants and things like that. And you absolutely want to use bug spray when you go out.
Is there a certain type? I know that they recommend a certain number, I guess. What is it, DEET or
DEET.
whatever? Is there a certain type or a number that's better, for instance, for children, to treat our children versus what the adults use?
Right.
Or?
The children should not go any more than 30%.
Okay.
The adults can go higher, and they go up to 50 plus, I think, on the DEET. But the children should not go any more than 30%. But you know what is really helpful, and at my house, I keep it right by the back door. You just have your containers of bug spray right there. So if you're going outside, you put it on. And it's also important, and this is for ticks as well as for mosquitoes, to, even though it's hot, to wear long sleeves and to
I guess the long, loose, and light in terms of
Correct.
clothing then? Okay.
Right, so it's airy and it still breathes, so you want to do that. You mentioned light. You will read that you're supposed to wear light-colored clothes. The reason that they say that when they're talking about ticks is because you can see the tick easier.
Well, I always wondered if it just meant that the ticks were not as attracted to it or what, but I guess definitely what you're saying makes more sense.
I mean, you couldn't see a tick very
true.
well on this, right? But you could see it on you much
Right.
easier. So it's really just related to seeing the tick. But this is going to be a very, very challenging year for all of us in terms of Lyme's disease and in terms of your triple E or West Nile virus. As I said, we already know that we have the Eastern equine in the community. We have isolated it from some mosquitoes in Chesapeake. It's already there, and we're going to have to do a lot of protective measures to keep ourselves from those mosquito bites so that we don't get the disease.
One thing, Dr. Welch, that I did want to share with you and our viewers as well is that we do have available from the City of Suffolk free mosquito dunks for Suffolk citizens at our fire stations as well as at the municipal building. So it's definitely something that they can come in, our citizens can obtain to treat standing water. So hopefully will have an effect on.
So that's what they can go ahead and put in the water,
Yes,
and they can get
on
well,
the
I
standing
didn't realize
water.
that, so you
and,
educated me. So that's good that it's available.
So between the emptying the bird baths and the old tires and cleaning up the general, things in the yard, that definitely is going to be something that we can certainly try to assist our citizens with as well.
And ditches, because you have a lot of ditches. We have a lot of ditches in Chesapeake, all of us around here do, because our water table is up, and so we do the ditches to help. But that's excellent.
But definitely something, as I said, more that we can share with our citizens to hopefully help this year. Now, is there anything else in terms of, as I mentioned, I know we've kind of run the gamut from sun exposure to...
We're scaring people. I don't want to scare people.
Please don't go out and enjoy the beautiful outdoors. But again, I think it's helpful because we want people to know what they can do to keep themselves safe and the precautions that they can take as well.
We want them to continue to enjoy the summer, and we want summer to be a fun time and a memorable time in terms of good memories. I certainly don't want it to be associated with illness or disease. And of course, I'm in public health, I'm into prevention, and there are ways to have fun but still be wise and to prevent you getting any of these diseases.
Well, again, Dr. Welch, I think that's definitely a good note to end on, because as I said, it's all about prevention and taking the necessary precautions. So again, did want to thank you for joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful summer, and here's to your health.